I'd like to talk a bit more about goal setting and goal achieving today, because there's a component of my goal setting that, to be honest, I thought everybody did. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a friend who's very experienced in goal setting, and it turned out he hadn't really thought about this particular idea before. And he thought it was a great idea, so I thought I'd share it with you so that you can see what you think. I always find that it's useful to share examples, not just talking abstracts. So I am going to talk you through a goal that I've recently achieved, and a goal that I achieved much faster than I thought I was going to be able to. Apologies for talking about me. This is all about you, but I do think it's going to be important to share an actual real world example with you. Around about 18 months ago, I stopped running, which was my main way of keeping fit. I had to stop because my knees decided that they didn't like running any longer. I stopped doing any kind of fitness at all for about 9 months, and then after that I needed to get back into fitness, so I started swimming. I'd swum before in the past, so I could vaguely swim, but I'd never done any real serious swimming before. I started swimming breaststroke because it's the most natural stroke for me. I've never, as long as I can remember, been able to do front crawl. And when I first started swimming this time, I was able to do 25 lengths easily, and I could push myself to do 40 lengths. I set myself an initial target to be able to do 64 lengths, which is a mile, and pretty soon I was able to do that without too much effort, just by progressively pushing it up a little bit. I then decided that I wanted to be able to do a mile of front crawl. The main reason for this, I saw other people swimming front crawl and I can't do it, and I don't like things that other people can do that I can't do, so I decided that's what I wanted to happen. I promptly did absolutely nothing about it because this was just something that was in my head. I then had the absolute great fortune a few months ago to go on a brilliant goal setting course with a really inspirational guy named Chris Williams, and Chris reminded me of the importance of having written goals. So once I'd been on that course, I wrote down the goal of being able to swim a mile of front crawl. As soon as it's written down, then I started to change the goal into being a plan. I've achieved the goal now. I swam a mile in front crawl about 2 weeks ago, and I reached that goal faster and easier than I thought that I was going to. And I believe that there are 3 components that made that happen. The first of those is not only having the goal written down, but it's reading it out aloud. Now, I'd love to stand here and tell you that I read it out loud every single morning, and it wouldn't quite be true. But it is true that almost every morning I read the goal out loud to myself. And that reinforces it. It just reminds me of what it is that I want to achieve. The second component of this strategy is to break the goal down into milestones or bite-sized chunks. When I set out on this goal, I couldn't do a whole length of front crawl without being so out of breath at the end of it that I needed to take a break. So the idea of being able to swim a mile or 64 lengths, although I kind of knew that I could do it, it really wasn't that believable at the time. So to get from where I was, if I just set the goal of 64 lengths, 1 mile of front crawl, it wasn't that believable, to be honest, and so it wasn't going to be that motivational. So the idea is I break that down into bite-sized chunks, and the first of those was to be able to swim 1 length out of every 10 of front crawl, and that seemed relatively believable to me. The next logical thing was to set milestone number 2 of being able to do 2 lengths of front crawl out of every 10, which is what I did. It then seems logical to make the next milestone 3, then 4, then 5, and all the way up to 10. I think there's a bit of a flaw with this though, and that is that when I set out, my belief level is low, so I'm likely to set milestones that are very easy to achieve. Once I get into this and my belief level starts to increase, then I'm more likely to set more ambitious milestones. And the more ambitious milestones I set, the faster and easier I'm going to achieve the goal. So I only ever set 2 of these milestones up front. The third component, and actually I'm going to split this into 2 subcomponents. The first of those is be aware of your own mindset and self-talk. And the second is every now and again, do a little bit more than you expected to. Just in the moment, just decide to push yourself a little bit. It's fantastic for your mindset. I began by asking myself the questions, what is it going to take to achieve this goal? And what are the things that are going to make it more difficult, and what are the potential obstacles? The kind of things that I came up with was 1, I'm not as fit as I would like to be because I hadn't exercised for a while. 2, I'm not as strong as I'd like to be. You've probably noticed I'm not a particularly muscular person, and my belief is that it takes, or my belief was, that it takes more strength to do front crawl than breaststroke. I also knew is the same thing as a belief. I knew that I didn't have the technique, so I needed to be building up technique, stamina and strength. Also going on in my head, I'm in my mid-50s, and although it's okay to push my body, I have to be aware that I probably can't push it as hard as I might have been able to perhaps in my 20s. I also need to be aware of my self-talk. As I'm doing the swimming, as I'm swimming, am I telling myself this is really hard? Or am I telling myself that I'm increasing my strength and I'm increasing my stamina, because they will have very different results. And then when it comes to pushing yourself a little bit further, this is the bit that really achieved this goal fast for me. And that is, if my goal is to swim 2 lengths out of every 10 of front crawl, just in one of them, maybe do 3 instead of 2. And not to set out in the morning to do it, otherwise that's what I've expected of myself, but just to perhaps find a time that I can push myself a little bit further than I thought I was going to. Once I got to the point where I could swim 2 lengths out of every 10, I needed to set my next 2 milestones. And I decided at that point I was going to set to do 3 and 4 lengths. It still seemed the logical thing to do. But what I also decided was that I was going to start attacking this goal from both ends. So I was going to push up to be able to do 1 length out of every 3 as front crawl. And what I was also going to do is, for my last 4 lengths, I was going to really push and do 4 lengths in a row as front crawl, because that way I'm setting myself up for the next milestone that I can do 4 consecutive lengths. And just to give you an idea of the sort of time scales up to this point, from starting out from scratch to being able to swim 1 length of front crawl out of every 10 took me about a month. The next part, to get to 2 lengths, actually took me longer. It probably took me 6 weeks to get to that point. Once I started to attack it from both ends, it happened really, really quickly. Because what I found is that I was going to do my last 4 lengths of front crawl. As I was doing that, on the last length, I said to myself, I can do just 1 more. And I did. I pushed myself up to 5. When I got out of that pool, I said to myself, if I can do 5, I can do 7. So the next time I went to the pool, I'm still working towards, at this point, being able to do 3 consecutively, but I did 7 lengths consecutively at the end of my swim. When I got out of the pool that day, I said to myself, if I can do 7, I can do 10. And if I can do 10, I can do 20. And if I can do 20, I can go all the way to 60. And it's at that point where this really became real for me. This is when I started to believe it, and this is when I realised that actually the goal wasn't as far away as I thought it was going to be. I originally set a time limit on this goal, and I didn't write it down because I wasn't 100% confident that I could make it. And my time limit was to do this by Christmas, and it's now almost the end of August, and I've already achieved the goal. The point when it changed was the point when I said to myself, I can do 7, and if I can do 7, I can do 10, and if I can do 10, I can do 20, if I can do 20, I can go all the way to 60. That's when it became real. That's when I really started to believe it. So I then reset my milestones and decided next time that I went to the pool, as long as the pool was quiet enough that I wouldn't interfere with other people, I was going to swim 10 lengths front crawl, 10 lengths breaststroke, 10 lengths front crawl, 10 lengths breaststroke. Next time I went to the pool, it didn't quite work out like that because I got there and it was really busy. So I swam half a mile, 32 lengths of breaststroke. But then the pool, not emptied, but it got a lot quieter and I could start swimming front crawl. Halfway to doing my 10 lengths, I suddenly realised if I can do 10, I can keep going. And I started to wonder how many I could actually do. And it turned out that I did 32 lengths. I did the second half a mile as front crawl. And when I got out of the pool that day, I knew that next time I went to the pool and it was quiet enough, I was just going to swim a mile. The next time I went to the pool was on a Tuesday, which is the day that it's usually the busiest. So in my head, on the way, I was going to swim probably 4 lengths front crawl, 4 lengths breaststroke, and I'd probably be able to do that without impeding anybody else's progress. When I got to the pool, it was almost empty, so actually the conditions were perfect for me to go for it, and it threw me a little bit because I wasn't expecting to, but figuratively speaking, I jumped right in. I said, right, today I'm going to do it. I set off way too fast. After about 6 lengths, I was really struggling, and I was just aware of my self-talk, and I just said to myself, slow down, you can do this, all you got to do is keep swimming. And I got to 10, and I knew that once I got to 10 I could keep going to 20, and I hit my 64 lengths. The whole thing took me around about 3 months. The first part, getting to 1 length out of every 10, was really slow. It was even slower to get to 2 lengths out of every 10, but from that point it all happened in the space of just a few weeks. Had I set out my milestones up front and stuck to them, I'd still be working on it. I'd still probably be doing 4 or 5 lengths out of every 10. So the component parts that made this work and can be applied to any goal is, number one, write the goal down. It is the most important part. And not only write it down, read it out loud to yourself to reinforce it. The second stage is break it down into bite-sized chunks. Break it down into milestones that are believable. Just write a couple of them. Third stage is be aware of your self-talk. Be aware of what your beliefs are around the goal and be open to changing them. And be aware in the moment what it is that you're saying to yourself, and be prepared to change it if necessary. The very last stage, and possibly the most important part, is to have a review session once you've achieved a goal. And for me, that starts out by writing down what I've achieved in my achievement book. You know, life's busy, and it's really easy to push yourself with something, to achieve something, and then to completely forget about it a few weeks later. And so having this book of achievements, first of all, it just gives me time to pat myself on the back for a job well done, because nobody else is likely to do that. So sometimes we have to do that for ourselves. But what that also does is that opens up my sense of curiosity, my sense of wonder. A few months ago, I didn't believe that I could swim a mile of front crawl. Once I started to believe that, I believed it was going to be difficult and it was going to take a long time. I've done it, it wasn't difficult, and it didn't take a long time. What other things have I been telling myself or stopping myself from doing because I believe that they're going to be hard? Interesting question. I wonder what answers you'll come up with when you ask yourself that.